is my pleasure to introduce to you Lisa Reisman, who is an author and a cancer survivor. I read your story called 5 Months, 10 Years, 2 Hours, which you wrote about what happened to you when you were diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme grade 4 brain cancer. Let me just set the scene. You're 32 years old, you're working in a high-powered law office in New York City. You're going to quit because it really doesn't define you anymore. You're going to get in a car, you're going to drive across the country and find out who you are. And then what happens?
The weekend before my final week of work, I went for a 5-mile run through Riverside Park. It was August 1st, 1998. It was a sweltering morning. I got back to my Upper West Side apartment. I was spent, I was exhausted. The phone was ringing. It was my sister. We talked every Saturday morning. She was living in Baltimore. I told her I would call her back when I got up. And I got up on Monday afternoon in a hospital room with my family surrounding me and a doctor telling me I had a brain tumor.
What happened? You blacked out? You had a seizure? What happened?
At some point after I got back from my run and after my head hit the pillow, I must have suffered a massive seizure. I did suffer a massive seizure. No one knows when, but for 46 hours after that, no one in my family knew where I was. My sister, it wasn't like me not to call back, so my sister grew increasingly concerned. She got my parents involved. They called the NYPD. They tried to get a copy of the key from the landlord. He was away for the week. The super didn't have a copy. Finally, Monday morning, my sister and my brother-in-law, who were living in Baltimore, went to the Amtrak station. They put a package of the only set of keys to my apartment on the Amtrak Express, so it went through Baltimore, Delaware, Philadelphia, Newark, New York. My stepmother picked up the keys at Penn Station, got a taxi, sped up to 82nd Street, got into my apartment, found me on the floor of my bedroom near death.
All of this time passes. They find you.
Right.
They say, it's a brain tumor, we've got to do surgery immediately. How are you processing all of this that is happening to you so rapidly?
Well, in a way, I was oddly fortunate because I was so out of it. I was so, I had suffered this massive seizure, so it was just sort of, okay, just go through, just do it, just do it. The first thing I said when the doctor said I had a brain tumor was, let's get it out, let's just get it out. So there was no time to start getting terrified about a doctor, a surgeon sort of opening up my brain and tinkering around. So so that was oddly fortunate, and it only really hit me when I was told my diagnosis.
That is a death sentence under many circumstances. Did you know when this came out of his mouth that you were in big, big trouble?
I knew it wasn't good. I knew it from just the word glioblastoma does not sound like it's a good thing. I looked at the faces of my sister and my brother-in-law, both of whom are doctors, and they were sort of frozen in shock. So at that moment, I decided I did not want to learn my prognosis, and I told everyone as much.
No one said to you, get your things in order, this isn't good?
No one said to me that. And I think that my sister and my brother-in-law would run interference all throughout in the event that some doctor would say that. There was one doctor who suggested I take a trip to Tahiti, and that was about as far as that got, yeah.
You're an athlete, the athlete of the family, as you write in your book. How do you think you beat this? And we're going to talk about all the things that you went through. How did you beat it? Was it mind over matter? Were you lucky? Was the treatment perfect?
Right.
How did you beat this?
I think I don't know how. I think I got lucky. Or I had a really good surgeon at Memorial Sloan Kettering, where I was operated on, who told my family that he had never done a cleaner resection, so I think that helped. I think also not knowing my prognosis, and also I was young enough that, and I was pretty fit, and I also was in this sort of, I had always been a runner, so I had this sort of training mentality. So gradually, because what happened was, I moved from New York, and I was staying with my mother in Branford and having treatments at Yale New Haven. So I had the whole day alone. I knew no one, and I just had to figure out a way to give shape and form to my days, and at the same time not think about what was happening, that I had this thing possibly growing in my brain. So gradually, with this sort of training mentality, I hammered out a regimen, and that's what I did. Yeah.
Let's take a look at a picture. I've never had an MRI. I'm claustrophobic.
Yeah.
I don't think I would do so well under MRIs, but you've had them. What was this training for an MRI? This
was training for an MRI. What happened was, at Memorial Sloan Kettering, after my surgery, I had my first MRI, and I just got so claustrophobic, and it began because that was when it was starting to sink in what was happening to me out of nowhere, and it felt almost like I was buried and I was in a coffin, and I freaked out, and they sedated me, and I got through another one. But then I learned all this happened in early August 1998. In September, I learned that I would have an MRI in December 2nd, that would tell me if the cancer had spread, which gave me 5 months to figure out a way to get myself ready to spend 45 minutes in this what I thought was like a coffin-like tube.
You wrote this book, 5 months, 10 years, 2 hours, which means?
The 5 months is the space of time from when I learned my diagnosis in August until the December MRI I mentioned, when I learned the cancer had not spread. And the 10 years is the time from when I learned that I might be okay, probably would be okay, would need MRIs twice a year forever, until a triathlon that I took on to mark my 10-year anniversary.
Tell me about that.
Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that it did not take me 2 hours to complete the triathlon. It took me 1 hour and 47 minutes, but I don't think that would fly.
So this was a better title to 5 months, 10 years, 2 hours.
I'm cheating myself at 15 minutes.
Because you're a better athlete than that.
Well, I don't know. It was a rough triathlon. So the 10-year anniversary of my diagnosis was coming up, and I'd had like celebrations after my first year, 5th year, 7th year, and I thought, okay, enough, because by that time, people who had been at my first year party were having health issues themselves. So I thought, okay, enough of that. And then I just wanted to do something that, and I didn't want to advertise it. I wanted to do something that would prove to myself that I was fit, that I was at the apex of fitness. And I didn't even know that I would write about it. I was a writer at the time, but I did it more because I was sick of parties, celebrating that I was alive when other people were dying,
Yeah.
So.
Always thinking of others, Lisa.
Well, I don't know about that.
When you wrote this book, what was the catalyst to make you do this, to get your story out there? Why did you want to do this?
Well, I just knew I had a story. And I knew that I had been given a story. I had not been a writer before. I had been a lawyer. My sister, who's a doctor, had always been the writer in the family. And I could always string words together. But once I learned about what had happened to me during those 46 hours and how close I came to death, I thought, this story has been gifted to me. I have to tell it. And because I always could string words together, I just started writing. And that was actually part of the regimen that I talked about earlier. That one thing I did was when I got up, I had all these thoughts and fears and terrors swirling around in my head, and I discovered that one way to sort of get rid of that or to let it out was I sat down at my mom's computer and I just would type. I would type for an hour at a time, and there would be no punctuation. I would just type what I was thinking. And it was just so cathartic. It was so therapeutic. And gradually, a story formed. That is, a lot of which is included in this book.
How is it resonating with people? What are you finding with this?
Yeah, the greatest gift has been when people who are people who are fighting cancer or their families tell me that this has helped them understand what their relative or sibling or spouse is going through.
Because you get pretty detailed about this, and and I did tell you this was difficult to read because I couldn't imagine the strength you mustered. But people do this every day; they find the strength to beat cancer.
Right.
How has cancer changed you as a person, or has it?
I have no idea. That's a great question. It made me into a writer, I guess, and okay, that's a tough question.
Do you think it has changed your outlook on life, given that diagnosis, so scary, and many people die from it? Mm-hmm. Do you feel grateful? Do you feel the same? Do you feel the need to get on a soapbox and say, hey, you guys can fight this, you can live, I did it?
I feel that I want to sort of correct a misconception that, and this is the 10 years of my title, that once you survive, or once you know that you have a chance to survive, it doesn't really get that much easier. It's not live each day as if it's your last. You can't do that. That's not sustainable. You have to figure out a way to live. And it's not just, you don't just pick up where you left off. You're a changed person. I was, but I didn't realize that. And I also felt this, I couldn't understand why I had survived. So I felt as if I had to do something admirable or momentous to validate my survival. And I tried for almost 10 years to do that, and I failed over and over again.
Now, why do you say you failed?
Because what I was doing was I was trying to succeed in the most sort of conventional terms, and the way that I sort of came out of it was, ironically, the opposite of what I did to survive. The way I survived was putting on blinders and just doing what I had to do to make myself well, not concerning myself with support groups or self-help books or even people who had cancer, just figuring out what I had to do to survive. But that's not sustainable. It's not surviving, it's living. And so what really saved me was sort of widening my lens and taking down the walls and discovering this great job that I have now, which is writing for my local paper and writing about just little businesses and people, not little people, but regular people who wouldn't ordinarily be written about, but who should
about
be.
Life.
Yeah, and it's tremendously rewarding because it's sort of a privilege when someone tells you their story, and it's also it's a challenge. You got to get it right. You know, it's to dignify them, to sort of tell their stories so that people will understand how, you know, their struggle, and it's so much more rewarding than, you know, a 14-hour day at the firm redistributing wealth among Fortune 500 companies.
You're not sorry you stepped away from that?
No, I'm not.
Not one day?
No.
You're 17 years cancer-free. You write about, I think you did, that there's collateral damage. You're not in this alone. Everybody is changed around you a bit when somebody in your family has cancer.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think my family was deeply, profoundly affected, and I think they decided, to their credit, that they were just going to keep this, maintain this upbeat attitude, and for my sake. And I mean, my mother in particular, she never showed anything, you know, her fear or whatever she was going through, her anxiety. She never showed me that. And I remember there was one particular night early on, even before I think I started treatments, and I was sleeping in the guest room, and I was having night sweats, and I was feeling really nauseated. And she drove me to the emergency room at Yale New Haven, and I still remember she never panicked. She just said, everything's gonna be okay. And as it turned out, that was the worst it got. My treatments, oddly, were, I tolerated them really well. I lost most of my hair, and my blood counts went down very low, but that was the worst of it. And that's when I remember my mom just being so calm. You're gonna be fine, everything's gonna be okay, and I was.
Did you ever ask her where she got her strength? Because moms do that.
Yeah. I think and she's taught me to do this, she sort of compartmentalizes everything. So she has what she calls a catastrophe zone in her head that she puts everything in there. It's like a drawer, and then she goes about her daily life. And I learned from that, and that's what I did during those 5 months to get better. I sort of compartmentalized the fact that I had brain cancer, and I tried to do everything I could aside from my treatments to get well.
Looking back on this, I have talked to some cancer survivors. Some people like that term, some people don't like that term. Some people like the word cancer thrivers.
I don't like any of those. I'm just a person.
And a lot of folks have told me that too.
Yeah.
And some people have said, in some strange ways, that kind of illness, that kind of diagnosis has been a gift of sorts, in that they view things so much differently. Would you say that? I guess you would not say that.
I think it slowed me down. I think eventually it slowed me down. I think I have a great deal of, when people, I have a great deal of, I take issue when people call me courageous or brave, because I feel like, I feel as though everyone has their struggles, and somehow mine.
There's an ache under every roof.
Yeah, so you know, we were talking about this another time. One thing I learned was that, it goes back to this blinder thing, that I sort of looked around me and I saw, okay, I'm not the only one who's struggling. There are all these other people who are struggling in ways that I never noticed before. So I think that the reason I don't call myself a cancer survivor or a thriver is that I went through this thing. It was a tremendous hurdle. It was a very scary thing that I went through, but I don't think I did anything particularly brave. I mean, I went to every treatment. I think what really helped me was just my fear of dying, and my conviction that I wasn't ready to die, that I had too much to do.
And have you done it all?
I have not done it all.
What's next?
I'm not sure.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Lisa Reisman, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your courageous story, dare I say that, and I think that others will learn from you.
Thank you so much.
When one this in, who is this girl? Spend all night kissing, and if one was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked, if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Things keep locked in the grocery store, but mine just to save time. Skip right ahead to the last ride. The harder we look, the less we can see. Don't you know, you know that you need me.